Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In today's lecture, we're going to discuss science, technology and social change, and this is part of the series on basic sociology. So in this lecture, we're going to understand first what is science, what do you mean by technology, how sociology has been a discipline wanted to be a science. There was a critique to sociology as a science. We will look into how different sociologists have tried to understand the relation between science, technology and social change. And by doing this, we're going to understand how the changes have taken place, how technology has had both positive and negative effect on human development, progress, and there are certain kind of detrimental causes of too much of technology in our life. So we all know that we are nowadays born with technology, with reproductive technology, with everything around us supported by technology. So it's very important to understand how we kind of make sense of this technology in society. So let us understand first the intersection between science and technology, which is one of the most evolving areas within sociology. So you have sociology of science, sociology of knowledge, a lot of sub-discipline coming in to make a sense of the relation between science and society. So this field, which is sociology of science, would examine how science and technology impact society, how social factors influence the development and use of scientific knowledge and technological innovation. Sociologists have studied how technology shapes various aspects of society, including communication, work, education and healthcare. In each of these fields, we see technology has played a dominant role. So today we kind of know how fast any kind of information just kind of is shared in a large global world. Work has changed, say, from the agricultural world to today what we call the IT workers or information sector worker. Education from, say, Gurukul to today we have online SWAM and MOOC classes. Healthcare has also started changing because of technology. Now, technology influences every aspect of social interaction, whether we see change in the job market, access to information, and the overall organization of societies. So we know that even in our houses, we now call it a smart home, where a lot of technologies are there. Even to kind of switch on the tube light, we need a technology. So there are kind of an intrusion of technology into every aspect of human interaction. Now, before we kind of understand how science has impacted society or technology brought about social science, first we need to understand what is science. What do we mean by science? Now, there can be various understanding of science as a body of knowledge, science as search for truth, but we will restrict to the understanding of science specifically to sociology. So in social sciences, science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. So when we say science as a method, what does it mean? It means a systematic observation. We have a systematic method of observation. We do experiments, then we kind of do comparative study and come out with certain result. So natural sciences is full of organized, systematic, cumulative understanding, and therefore we can call science as a body of organized, systematic, cumulative pursuit of knowledge. And this knowledge is both about the physical world as well as social world. So as sociologists, we are not just trying to understand human interaction with humans, but we are also trying to understand humans' interactions with the outside world, with the physical world. So this understanding of a systematic pursuit of knowledge is science. And therefore, much in the natural sciences, how do we go about doing scientific research is to do a rigorous testing of hypothesis. So we have a hypothesis which could be a tentative assumption, and through the experiment and the results, we kind of prove the hypothesis as true or as false. But in social sciences, it is not so systematic in terms of getting one answer to one hypothesis. There could be multiple answers to one hypothesis or an assumption, and therefore the natural sciences is more based on empiricism, that is empirical reality. What can be observed is the empirical reality, and there is nothing beyond it. So when we look into the empirical reality based on our observation, we arrive at certain set of ideas related to that empirical reality, and therefore we start theorizing that reality. So it is like object as out there, and we have a descriptive analytical understanding of it. So when sociology as a discipline was emerging, the objective of the scholars and philosophers were to conceive sociology as a positivist science. So we have listened to this or learnt about positivism in sociology. So positivism implies that we are looking for sociology as a positive science. That is, it could explain reality in terms of certain rules or certain facts. So we know a number of scholars influenced by the natural sciences like biology, influential in developing this discipline. And the first name that comes into mind is Herbert Spencer, who viewed society as an organism. So Herbert Spencer's organic analogy was going to make a comparison of the natural world, which is the organic world, and the social world, which is human being. And his theory says that this entire organism is made of parts and whole. Similarly, the society is made up of parts and whole. Each of these parts or institutions are kind of connected to each other, and that result into a unified whole, which is called as society. So this was a positive method by which we could study the social phenomena. Now, even Durkheim, Emil Durkheim for that matter, who gave us the rules of sociological method, tells us that sociology is a positive science. That is, he wanted to study society through the idea of certain generalized rules, which he could call as social fact. And the social fact could be anything around us, any object, animal, plant, anything around us. And what do? We kind of develop a systematic knowledge around that subject. So he says that social facts have certain kind of features, which is that they are external to human being, they are kind of exerts pressure, and therefore these kind of understanding of society as rules, as facts, it was the understanding of sociology as kind of very close to the physical sciences. And sociology, the knowledge was based on observation and empirical data. Now there was kind of an understanding that physical sciences was happening in the laboratory. They kind of have certain kind of living things on which the experiments are done. But human beings cannot be subject to experiment. For that matter, the philosophers and scholars said that the whole society is like a lab, and we can do our experiment through observation, so empirical understanding of this. But then there was a lot of critique to understanding sociology as a science, and the first scholar or sociologist to have questioned the idea of sociology as a science was Max Weber. Max Weber was critical of the idea of science, of sociology being part of positive science. Why? Because he was of the opinion that empirical reality is not fixed. Empirical reality changes. It changes from one time to the other, from one society to the other. So according to Weber, social reality was qualitatively different from physical and natural reality. So the subject matter of social science was not the same as the subject matter of physical and natural societies. So social sciences studied human behavior, human interaction, and he was trying to understand social action which is constructed in our everyday life. And we do not have the same kind of repetitive action being performed. There could be a lot of critique, there could be a lot of conflict. So human behavior cannot be understood just understanding it as concrete reality. So human behavior was not like object out there which could be observed, measured, and attributes assigned. Human behavior, the meaning and motives was important. So we need to understand why a particular social action was performed by an actor, what meaning was assigned to it, and that would be kind of taking us to the subjective realm of it. So we in sociology, basically we have the two branch. One saying sociology as objective science and the other as sociology as subjective science, and there's a lot of kind of a debate between the two. When we look to Bruno Latur understanding of science as construction of version of reality. So Bruno Latur and Steve Bulger, they studied how the scientists were doing research, and these were physical scientists. So they could spend a lot of time trying to win a lot of research grants. So the science in physical world is dependent on lot of grants because it is kind of doing experiments, and these experiments incur a cost. So until and unless you have certain grants for the research, doing research was kind of limited. Whereas in social sciences, we need not necessarily depend on the material cost because we are living in a society, we observe, we are part of it. We could always unconsciously or consciously do observation and be kind of doing some amount of research. So the scientists from the physical world, they form a network in which many individuals were engaged in fierce battle to construct reality. Now this reality which is constructed in the social world is actually not the objective reality because it could involve inventing special machines just to prove that one particular set of theory is true versus the other. And if another individual challenged the version of reality being produced, they could be disenrolled from the network. So what he is actually pointing out is that even in the physical world, the construction of reality is dependent on emotion, and it is dependent on the meaning that we attach to that particular action. So we have understood science, what is a science, and how sociologist was emerging as a science and critique of it. Next, we try to understand what is technology. Now, we are all familiar with the fact that technology is the application of science to address the problem of daily life. So we was kind of wanted to communicate from sitting in two different parts of the world or two different regions. The telephone was a technology which was developed from stone being used as a mode of fire to the development of microwave for cooking is an example of technological advance for everyday life. But the pace of technological advancement means that it is a continuous process. But what happens is that technology once sets into taking place, one kind of a technology, and we are seeing that every day the technology is almost changing. The algorithm of machines is changing, and this pace of development or progress of technology is so fast that human beings are not equally having access to them. So what happens? A gap is created and an inequality is created, which is also known as digital life. So as sociologists, we are not concerned about how the machine or the parts of the machine has changed or how it is kind of being used. What we are trying to understand is how human relations are affected by the technology. And one of the problems that has arisen because of technology is the digital divide. Digital divide is the knowledge gap which is kind of constructed between two kind of individuals or group because of unequal access to information, and therefore it is kind of also constructing a vicious cycle of poverty. So during the COVID-19 lockdown, we saw that a number of children who belong to the poor economic class were not able to do classes or were not able of this part of the school and education system because they did not have the access to technology over which education was imparted. So a number of children were left out from the education system. Now it creates a digital divide between children who had access to technology and those who did not have access to it. So when we look into these kind of understanding of how technology is part of the reality, we understand technology as a social construct. So in social sciences, we have these two kind of approach to understand technology and its impact on society. One is the social construction of technology and the other is technological determinism. Now, social construction of technology is kind of used in two ways, but these are more or less overlapping. The first is that it refers to a theory about how a variety of social factors and forces change technological development, or what we would say technological change, and the meaning associated with technology. So now here is the inroad of a sociologist who would try to understand a technology. Now the same technology might be differently accepted or differently kind of influential in the society, and so what happens is that this progress of technology is not only dependent on machine but also on the value system, also on the cultural and also in the economic capacity to use that technology. So the phrase social construction of technology, which is also referred as SCOT, refers to a specific amount of the social construction. It tells us how we need to assign certain meaning, certain cultural specific meaning to the way in which technology develops and it influences the human interaction in a society. According to Ronald Klein and Trevor, SCOT, that is social construction of technology, they use the notion of relevant social group, interpretative flexibility, closure and stabilization. The concept of interpretative flexibility is a distinguishing feature. Now, what does interpretative flexibility imply? It implies that you might be having an access to a technology, but how you interpret the use of it would be flexible depending on the cultural norm of that particular society. So, to claim that technology has interpretative flexibility is to claim that artifacts are open to radically different interpretation by various social groups. That is, artifacts are conceived and understood to be different things to different groups. Artifacts, machines, tools, they do not have only one meaning. It depends on the use of that particular tools or artifact by individual and group, and therefore depending on the uses, the meaning that will be assigned would vary. So we need to kind of not arrive at a generalized understanding, for instance, that it could be only used for a progressive thing. The same tool, the same machine could have a negative implication. The second approach to understand the relation between technology and social change is technological determinism. Now, this approach was used by structural functionalists. The structural functionalists were basically focusing on the functions that the structures were playing in order to maintain status quo or equilibrium. So the structural functionalists, they wanted to explore technological determinism in terms of how technology was a key for the advancement of society. It was a necessity for the society to progress, to develop, and they argue that technology develops in response to societal need, and its implementation needs to improve societal functions and increase stability. So the whole idea that they were looking into the functional aspect, they were kind of more positive in terms of articulating the necessity of technology, that it only emerges when you have a essential need of the society, and therefore the function is to improve the societal equilibrium. So the structural functionalist view of society was kind of very close to the technological determinist. So the structural functionalists were also saying that each part is going to, or each structure is having a part to play, and that part is actually prerequisite, or it is a necessary component of the structure. So technology is considered as an essential component of society, and this is kind of keeping the society bound together. So if we could see the positive side or the technological determinism or approach, again when we kind of communicate with people across the globe, or we are able to kind of organize a classroom across the internet platform, is kind of emphasizing the functional utility of the technology. Technological determinism has two tenets. One, that technology develops independently from society. So that is that irrespective of whether the society requires that or not, it will develop because it's kind of integral to human society. You are progressing, there is a develop. So as human beings are engaging their active minds, their interaction with culture takes place, technology will automatically develop. The second tenet is that when a technology is taken up and used, it has powerful effect on the character of society. So both the approaches are trying to focus on the relationship between technology and the way it impacts the relationship in society. The first tenet, that is technological development independent of society, would depend on innovation, discoveries. So discoveries has been a part of human history. Through the human history, we have seen discoveries, innovations and inventions taking place. So these inventions are directly related to the previous invention, and that is science. You have an invention, you want to work on it and kind of make it better, so it will progress, and the change that it will have in society will also change. So technological development is considered to separate from social forces. So engineers and inventors, they kind of keep working on their own individual space, and that is the matter that they kind of were not even discovering, and most of the time manipulating nature. According to the second tenet of technological determinism, when technologies are adopted by societies or a particular social group, the adoption brings about or determines the social change and patterns of social behavior. So once the society has adopted that particular technology, then it has to kind of bring about a change in the relationship between human being, the change in the relation between structure and the institution, and there is a particular pattern in which the relationship evolves. So technological change is said to create often kind of an idea that this adoption of a particular technology need not necessarily be at the same pace. So technology evolves, the technology changes, but the social cultural value of that particular society does not change. What happens? A cultural lag is developed. So the scholar who worked on technological determinism was Lean White, and he argued that in feudal society evolved from the invention of the stirrup. The second example is Langdon Winner, who claimed that society cannot have nuclear power without hierarchical organization. So if they kind of look into the way in which there is a kind of the dominance of certain kind of nation or state in having access to technology, nuclear power, it also creates a hierarchy, and there is a hierarchy where those who have more technology, those who have more nuclear power becomes more destructive, are ranged higher in terms of the hierarchy compared to the other. So Weiner's broader claim is that technology necessitates particular form of political organization. So the principle of technological determinism leads to commonly held view that technology determines society, and it not only determines the way the relations are organized in a society. When we are saying it determines society, it determines the economic condition, it determines the political standing in the global scenario, it determines the adoption of certain cultural pattern or kind of negating certain cultural aspect, and it also creates a lot of conflict on the account of technology, and it changes the character of the society. Now, one of the very important work to understand the idea of technological determinism is Lewis Mumford. Lewis Mumford was a historian and a sociologist who explored the relation between technology and society. So, in his book Techniques and Civilization, he discussed how technological advancement drive social change by altering the ways people work, communicate and organize their life. So there were a lot of work which was written in when we kind of look into the transition, evolution of society from say agrarian to industrial with the onset of Reformation, scientific rational world. And Mumford was one scholar to look into how technological innovation was shaping civilization. And he argues that technology have the power to shape cultural values and social structures. And when we look into the way in which technology affects society, we also see, and what we have also discussed is the idea of technological stratification. It creates hierarchy, it creates gap, digital divide, it creates a regional gap, regional difference based on the use of technology, and the different forms of technological stratification is digital divide, which could be class based, region based. Access to technology is kind of creates a gap. And because of digital divide, there will be a knowledge gap, which will create a gap between the information that two different individuals from two different settings would have. And most important is that when we look into science and technology and social change is to understand Ogden's theory of social change. And in Ogden's theory, the social change can be understood through three processes. One is invention, the second is discovery and diffusion. And all three has been a part of human society. Invention kind of bringing about new technology. It could be material, non-material. It could be in the change in the organization. So that's kind of a driving force of cultural change. Discovery is a new way of seeing reality. The reality could be present, but people give a different meaning to it. Discovery contributes to advancement of knowledge, and diffusion is spread of invention. So when we look into this theory, we can realize that science, technology and social change are kind of symbiotically related to each other. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.